There was a hustings event that I attended with all the other candidates, and the subject of Ukraine and Russia came up. And Lowe parroted pretty much the exact same lines that Nigel Farage made yesterday in his interview with Nick Robinson. He said that basically when he had been a Brexit MEP, Lowe, in Brussels, he felt that Ukraine had been, quote, constantly poking the Russian bear. And whilst he felt that it was a very complicated situation, he believed there needed to be a negotiated settlement. Now, I was expecting personally that to go down quite badly among the audience members. He actually got quite a large round of applause, and that did surprise me. So I'm not sure. I know this is a bit of a woolly answer, but I think it could have two different effects. I think there may be a few people that are put off, but I think, if anything, among the base, it will probably do nothing to sway them. In fact, a lot of them probably agree with Nigel Farage.
Lovely to have you with us as ever, Harry. Look, the rumpus over Conservative betting on the election day isn't going away soon. What's the latest? What can you tell us about what's going on, and how do you expect the story to unfold and carry on?
Yeah, well, absolutely, Hugo. So we reach yet another end of the week whereby the Conservative election campaign is badly derailing once more, and this has been a particularly bad week because of this, what's turning into a scandal, frankly. So the latest is, as of today, we have two Conservative parliamentary candidates who are being investigated by the Gambling Commission because they seem to have placed bets, and these are currently allegations, but they seem to have placed bets before the election was announced. And the allegation there is that they may have had insider information when they placed those bets. And then we also have a senior Conservative official, the director of campaigns, the guy that's supposed to be running the show during this election, who's also under investigation and has had to step aside and take a leave of absence. So things couldn't get much worse, I think, for the Conservatives. Rishi Sunak was obviously grilled on this at BBC Question Time, the Leaders' Special on Thursday. You could see there was a palpable sense of anger, frankly, from the Prime Minister about this. And I think the reason why that is, Hugo, is because it kind of resurrects some of the feelings that lots of voters already had about the Conservative Party around Partygate, a lot of the sleaze scandals that we've seen, this sense that there's one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us. So in terms of where this goes now, the Gambling Commission is carrying out what is quite a wide-ranging probe into this. They've asked all the bookmakers to trawl through their records and look for any bets placed by people who may be connected to Westminster from the 1st of May onwards. Now, I'm going to be writing about this tomorrow, so I can't say too much, but what I can tell you is that their investigation is a lot more extensive than people realise, and there are more than 4 people, because there's currently 3 Conservative people and a police officer involved. There are more people that the Gambling Commission are looking at. So I think this has more legs, frankly.
Well, I mean, so there were graphs floating around showing the level of betting there'd been at some betting firms on the date of the election, shortly before the announcement, and it seemed like to be like a real sort of noticeable spike. Obviously, the thing are people are going to wonder, like the Prime Minister might have been angry, but he hasn't sacked anyone, and so people will wonder: is the reason why he hasn't sacked anyone because he might end up having to sack an awful lot of people?
Well, that is a good question. I think there is something in that there's more people to come out in this story. I also think, to be fair and balanced to the Conservative Party, that they want to allow due process to take place. And but the problem is that we're in the middle of an election campaign, so you may want to have the time to allow the Gambling Commission to investigate and reach its conclusions. But in an election campaign, it's a disaster because there's only a few days left till people go to the polls, and all they're reading about at the moment is a number of senior people in the Conservative Party seeming to have placed bets and made money on something. So it's a difficult one for sure.
Well, that's definitely yet another reason to read the Sunday Times tomorrow. I'm reading between the lines, but of course in the paper, read the actual lines. Look, speaking of papers, J.K. Rowling is writing in today's Times. She's launched an exercise at Keir Starmer over trans issues. How is this going to play, Harry? Is this damaging for Starmer? Is it helpful for Starmer? How will this be taken in Labour HQ?
I think it's definitely a setback for Sir Keir Starmer because he actually performed pretty well, I think, at the Question Time special the other day. And he was asked quite a difficult question by a member of the audience about his position on trans rights. And he said that, he tried to...
considered, wasn't it? His answer. Yeah.
Exactly. But the problem is I actually think his answer, whilst he got a round of applause for it, he actually seems to, I think, have provoked J.K. Rowling into writing in the Times today, because she says in her piece that what she found particularly irritating about his response is that, so Keir Starmer said, I believe that a man has a penis and a woman has a vagina, just like Tony Blair does. But the problem is in Labour is one of the big controversies that's been going on is that Rosie Duffield, a Labour MP, has been fighting against the party's position on trans rights, because she's advocating from the other side, on the women's rights side. And what Keir Starmer said, he was asked about this. Well, why did you not come to the aid of Rosie Duffield when she was facing all this abuse for saying what you're basically saying now? And he said, well, at the time, it was a really toxic debate. And J.K. Rowling's saying today, well, what he's implied there is that when Rosie Duffield said something, it was toxic, but when another bloke, i.e. Tony Blair, says it, oh, it's perfectly fine and legitimate. So that's the problem. And the other problem that I think Keir Starmer has on this issue is that he clearly has moved around a bit on it. You know, he didn't have a clear viewpoint on it, and now he says he does. But like so many of the issues in Labour, the problem is that people wonder if Keir Starmer actually stands for anything. And I think this particular row helps highlight that maybe he just says what he thinks people want to say rather than what he actually believes.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where this one goes, because as you say, I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more of that. Let's move on to reform. Nigel Farage last night interviewed on the BBC by Nick Robinson. He said that NATO and the EU provoked Russia into invading Ukraine, which has sort of landed quite heavily. Although, as we were saying before, I mean, this isn't anything that Nigel Farage hasn't said before. Do you think? I mean, obviously, the Conservatives are going to try and make hay with this as a way of sort of winning back some reform voters, because when Jeremy Corbyn had these sorts of politics, they were intensely damaging to him. Do you think this is going to damage reform or not?
I think it could have an effect on potentially some of the people who are Conservative voters traditionally, but are now giving reform a serious look before polling day. I think there could be some people who feel very strongly about Ukraine. Britain, compared to other countries, has been very much behind Ukraine's supporting Ukraine and defense of Ukraine. So I think that may have an impact. However, I have to say, just from my own experience this week, I was in Great Yarmouth, which is one of the 3 seats most likely to go to reform on July 4th. And I was following around Rupert Lowe, who is the reform candidate. And there was a hustings event that I attended with all the other candidates. And the subject of Ukraine and Russia came up. And Lowe parroted pretty much the exact same lines that Nigel Farage made yesterday in his interview with Nick Robinson. He said that basically when he had been a Brexit MEP, Lowe, in Brussels, he felt that Ukraine had been, quote, constantly poking the Russian bear. And whilst he felt that it was a very complicated situation, he believed there needed to be a negotiated settlement. Now, I was expecting personally that to go down quite badly among the audience members. He actually got quite a large round of applause, and that did surprise me. So I'm not sure. I know this is a bit of a woolly answer, but I think it could have 2 different effects. I think there may be a few people that are put off, but I think, if anything, among the base, it will probably do nothing to sway them. In fact, a lot of them probably agree with Nigel Farage.